I finished making my hexagons to my desired shape, and now we are ready to start pinning bits together and seaming them. So I've folded both my hexies into my cardigan shape. I've decided where I would like the front and the back to be. And now with my little safety pin stitch markers, I'm just going to pin my garment together, and then I'll be ready to start working along the top here. I have already done this sleeve, and you'll see I've just done a simple seam with my crochet hook because I find yarn needles really fiddly and I find it really easy to hook and just continue working. So I'm going to walk you through that idea. I'm going to continue my edging along the back of my cardi and down this sleeve, and then I will add on to either end of my sleeves because I'd like them both to be a little bit longer, but I'm working with this much yarn left, so I can only work until that runs out. And I'm prioritizing long sleeves over long cardigan body. So if you have unlimited resources, you may make a different choice, but that's fine. Working from the top edge of your hexie, find that corner and match it up, and then just put a few stitch markers in. You might like to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I usually put my safety pin or my marker in the little gap between my clusters, because that ensures that I'm not going to get to the end and find one side has 3 stitches more than the other. I'm going to pin this corner to the corner of the center back so that I'm ready to keep chaining across. And just check before you start to join the 2 bits together that you're happy with the layout, that you have your bits facing the same way. Yeah, and then go to. I'm going to add a couple more stitch markers so that my life is easy when I get over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Add a stitch marker, count across on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And maybe one more to get me to the edge here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pin your bits together. I like using these little markers because you can just work straight over them and then come back and take them out when you're done. All right, continue on with the same size hook that I began the project with, which is a 4.5 millimeter, so I don't get any bunching or weird stuff. I have started at one cuff and I have seamed this cuff already. I put this on and decided where I wanted my neckline to sit, how much space I wanted at the back of the cardigan and at the front. And now I'm just going to continue working my row of single crochet across this edge until I get to my next marker and I have to start seaming together. So I'm going to put 1 single crochet in the corner space and 1 single crochet in the next corner space, just so it sits nice and flat. And I will eventually have a seam down here as well, but I don't want that top to buckle. 1 single crochet in the top of each double crochet as you go along. Don't work into the little space you find between the clusters, or you'll have extra single crochet and the edge of your work will get frilly. So only 1 single crochet in each stitch along. If you can, just try and keep your tension nice and even, because if you pull these stitches really tight, you'll pucker your work and you'll have gathers that won't sit the way you would like it to. Okay, here's my stitch marker coming up, so I'm just going to keep working until I get to that stitch marker. And I'm considering this to be the wrong side of my cardigan. So when I call this finished, I will put the seams on the inside. And because of that, I'll just come across and show you what I did over here. The sleeve that's already completed. So it doesn't show so much on the other side. I've just worked on the outside loops. What does this mean? It means that instead of engulfing the 2 loops at the top of each stitch, like usual, I would go through these top 2 loops here, or that little V, and have a loop at the top. I'm only going to work through the loop closest to me, and then the loop furthest away from me. so on the other side of that stitch. It doesn't hugely matter, but I want my seams to sit flat, and this is the easiest way of ensuring that that happens. So I'm going through one loop, the part of the stitch that is closest to me, and then the part of the stitch that is furthest away. So not the part of the stitch that's closest to the inseam, but the side of the stitch that sits the furthest away. And that's going to get me a flat seam. It's a little bit fiddly, I'm not going to lie to you, but I think that the results probably make it worth it. If you want a high contrast look or obvious seaming, you may prefer to be seaming on the right side of your work, so that everyone can see how neat your seams are. But that is a style choice that you get to make for yourself. I am going to stick with my outside loops. Oh, like I said, a little bit fiddly, I nearly grabbed the wrong one. So I'm looking at the top of the stitch, and I can see my little V-shapes or my little loops, and I'm working into the one closest to me, and then the one that is the furthest away. And this is where stitch markers can be really good, because if you do accidentally work into the same stitch twice, you're going to find out when you get to your next safety pin, because it won't sit straight, and then you only have to unpick or frog a little bit instead of pulling out the entire seam or trying to make a bit of a hash of it at one end and having things not line up properly. But if you get this stuff right, it just helps your garment to sit flat, and that adds so much to the overall presentation and the overall finish of your garment. Outside loop, outside loop. I have also chosen to seam my hexagons, and then I will continue working in the round to make my sleeves longer. So that's going to change my color distribution a little bit. I'll get thicker stripes of color, but that's the choice that I've made. I don't want to work into the same stitch, but I don't want to take my stitch marker out. Outside, outside. Obviously, if you're working this in a single color or with blocks of contrast, then how you choose to work the sleeves, whether you work them back and forth and then join at the desired length, or whether you join them up now and then work in the round, won't matter. But I think it's good to understand how your yarn is going to work up a little differently, so you can make a choice. If the yarn being in thicker stripes is going to bother you, then you may wish to continue working back and forth. Now, obviously, I'm not giving you any stitch counts here, because your hexagon may have totally different stitch counts to mine. It all comes down to the size of hook that you use and the ply of the fiber that you use, and also whether you like a loose draping texture or whether you like your garment to have a little bit more body. Over into the next cluster. Outside stitch, outside the stitch. There's that tricky one again. It won't make a world of difference if you accidentally work into the wrong loop on one stitch, but it's good to aim for consistency. Oops, outside loop only, outside loop only. So every time my hook goes through, it's only going through 2 strands of yarn, and then I yarn over and pull it through. If I was working through both loops, I would have 4 strands encased in this stitch, and that would make it a lot bulkier. So again, it's going to contribute to the overall texture of your garment. Resist the temptation to chain tightly, because then your sleeves will kind of sag away from this top seam. Always try and keep the chain the same kind of gauge as your double crochet stitches. definitely leave this last stitch marker in because it's going to show you where you started to work your sleeve in the round again. And I'm going to finish attaching my sleeves by putting my hook through that chain space and through the chain space of the other square and single crocheting them together. Now we end up with like a funny little glitch here almost, where you're going to have kind of a space between these two wedges where you'll just create another wedge so that when the seam sits flat and pulls open, you will have a wedge extending down. So if you are going to bother counting your way around this, I don't know why you would, but if you would, if you want to count your clusters, you're thinking put a cluster there in your seam, and then a cluster there. So this space is going to be 3 clusters. So to start my first cluster, I am going to do exactly what I always did when working in the round. I'm going to chain 3. And then I'm going to hop into my next cluster, okay, because that's going to start this 3 DC cluster. When I come back around, I'll put the other 2 DC in, just like I did when I was working hexies before. Now, that's what I was going to do, turn my work, because this is my right side, and where I've got the seam is my wrong side. So unless I want a different texture, because I'm working in the round, like I did my hexies, I'm going to turn my work and work on the inside of the sleeve, which is the right side. Okay, so I'm going to go to the left of my hook, left of my seam, and this is where I start to work in the round again. And you get to make your sleeve as long as you like. And this is exactly like making your hexagons. There is no difference at all. You just continue until you get to the desired length. What you do need to consider is if your sleeves are going to be long and square, or if you want to gather them in at the cuff. So let's have a little chat about that. Long and square, nice and wide at the wrist, just like this, means you don't have to do anything. You can just work to the desired length. And then if you're feeling fancy, just pop a row of single crochet in to finish your work nicely, and give yourself, you know, a good solid edge that won't stretch out of shape. If you want to create a bloused effect and bring the sleeves in, then you're going to need to decrease. And again, how you do this is going to change the shape of your sleeve. Because I have said this is a beginner project, and also because long square sleeves are my thing, and I like the way they look with a shorter cropped body, I am not going to decrease my sleeves. If I was, I would probably do it like this. I'll just turn this around for a minute. You keep going on your sleeve, don't get confused. I would just put a single crochet in each space between the cluster. And as you can see, that really gathers my sleeve up very, very quickly, because every cluster just reduces down to 1 stitch. And you will need, after you've done this row of single crochet, you will need to repeat it, but that will gather your sleeve in super duper fast. It also gives you the option, if you like, of gathering just the bottom edge of the sleeve in and leaving the top straight, or gathering the entire sleeve in to form a really super gathered cuff. Okay, so there are options. The best thing about crochet is that you can experiment. You can try this gather. If you don't like it, no harm, no foul, just pull out the row of stitches. So, I feel that you need to keep working around there. You know how to do that. So let's just take my hook out of there, throw that to one side, and point to the back. I'm going to seam my back in exactly the same way I seamed my sleeves. I will cannibalize my crochet markers and plug them in down here. And then I'm just going to work straight down, and I will then cut my yarn. And it's up to you how raw you want to leave your front, or if you'd like to add a couple extra rows. This is all going to depend on your body shape, your body size, and how this fits you. But again, it's crochet, so you can always add it, and if you don't like it, just rip it out again. No harm, no foul. So I will leave you to get on with your seaming along the tops of your sleeves. Ta-da! seaming down your center back, and then I'll meet you back here and we can talk about finishing off the sleeves and yeah, put an end on it. Well done.